Good morning, everybody. A special thanks to the speakers that are present here today, and thanks to the audience online for the interest you have taken in joining us from different parts from Holland and Spain and beyond. We're now at the new wing of the embassy. We have not even officially moved into here, but hopefully this doesn't affect the viewers at home or in other offices. And I'm very pleased that through the live stream, we are able to reach all stakeholders, both in Spain and in the Netherlands and beyond. And I'm especially happy to host this meeting because many years ago at the OECD, I have been working diligently in the topic of responsible business conduct in the financial sector. I even was considered to be a guru on due diligence in the financial sector, but that's a long time ago. And today we have much better experts in this field around the table. But it's a great pleasure to be back a bit in this area. It's a great reason to host this event, and it's our aim to foster collaboration between our two countries, and in this case in the financial sector. In this sense, it's great to see that there's already good cooperation with, of course, the joint non-paper by the two Spanish bank associations, the Banking Alliance of Germany and the Dutch Banking Association, as a good example. Interchanging best practices between the companies and institutions in our countries strengthens our common reach. And we are very pleased that the Director General for Foreign Economic Relations of the Netherlands is present here today in Madrid to open this event, given the importance of this topic and the fact that COP27 has just concluded. Some practicalities. We have a panel later on that is moderated by the Spanish Bank Association. Although for the online audience it's not possible to raise questions, we don't provide for a chat service, but I'm confident that members of the Spanish and Dutch banking associations will be happy to be in touch with you after the event. And it's good to know that the session is recorded, so you will have the opportunity to watch it later or to send it to other people in your network. Now I would like to give the floor to Hanneke Schuiling, Director General for Foreign Economic Relations of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, for the opening words. Thanks so much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, dear Roel, Mr. Ambassador, for the introduction. I'm really very glad to be here today at this event organized by the Dutch Banking Association, the Spanish Banking Association, and the Dutch Embassy in Madrid. Sustainable finance is a subject that matters to us all. It's one of the important tools we can use to achieve our climate goals. Sustainability in the financial sector is therefore also one of the priorities of the Dutch Ministry of Finance. This spring, the Minister of Finance launched an ambitious policy agenda on this topic. It consists of a comprehensive set of ambitions and actions for the Netherlands at national, European and global level. In this agenda, we focus on three things. First, the management of sustainability risk by financial institutions, very important. Secondly, enhancing transparency. And thirdly, strengthening the sustainability impact of the sector. Around 50 Dutch financial institutions, in cooperation with the Ministries of Finance and Climate and Energy, made a commitment in 2019 to the goals of the Paris Agreement. And based on their commitment, they provide insight into the carbon footprint of their portfolios and draw up action plans for reducing this. The key aspect of this commitment is that it is overseen by a public-private monitoring commission and an independent reviewer. Then a few words on the very important topic of responsible business conduct, and a subject also close to my heart. The cornerstone of sustainable finance is responsible business conduct. This entails conducting proper environmental and human rights due diligence. And banks have a very crucial role to play in improving labor conditions and the environment worldwide. In 2016, Dutch banks took their responsibility for collectively improving their human rights due diligence by means of a sector agreement. In their sustainability reports, they discuss their responsible business conduct policy, risk analysis, and the most severe risk, and mitigation efforts, of course, very important. Current developments in the EU on legislation make it all the more urgent for banks to take action. A European level playing field for the financial sector on responsible business conduct is necessary to create a bigger positive impact worldwide. And that's why today's event is so timely and important, also in light of Spain's upcoming presidency of the Council in 2023. Today, we can share best practices and lessons learned and discuss the state of play in the field of sustainable finance. I hope that today will be a productive event where we step up our cooperation on this important topic. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hanneke, for the opening words. Now I'd like to give the floor to Ilko Dubbeling, the director of the Dutch Banking Association. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's so great to be here at this hybrid event, both in person and digital. And recently I had the opportunity to visit Australia, and I learned about an ancient principle that was taught by the indigenous people, the original inhabitants of the land, and it's called the seventh generation principle. And the seventh generation principle applies to decisions made about energy, water, natural resources, and it ensures that those decisions we take are applied to the next 7 generations to come. And that's really something that sinked in with me, because if you take everyday decisions and you have to think about what does it mean for tomorrow or next year, it might be easy, but the next 7 generations to come is quite a big thing. And it can also be applied to relationships. So it's not only about physical things, but also how do we keep our relationships strong and good and healthy for the next 7 generations in the future. Today, we are here in Madrid, an important place in Europe with a strong and long history. And more recently, in 2019, COP25 was held here, of which I keep fond memories. It was also the moment that the Spanish banking sector announced its sustainability, its climate commitment. And around the same time, Hanneke, you already mentioned it, in the Netherlands we also announced our national climate commitment, which was derived from a broader climate agreement in the Netherlands between private companies, the private sector and the government. And indeed, 52 financial institutions are voluntarily part of this commitment. And all of these institutions will measure and report their CO2 emissions. Not only of their own institutions, but of their clients, of their portfolios. And all of these institutions will develop, and have developed, and are developing, and publish action plans for CO2 reductions. And before the end of this year, in the coming weeks, we will publish a next progress report, and there will follow another one in 2023. And the first 4 financial institutions, the first 4 banks have already published their action plans. And Floska, I'm really happy that you are here today from ING, because you were one of the first to publish your action plans. It's quite a lengthy one. I've read it. It's over 180 pages, but it really shows also the reduction paths that you already have in place for all these sectors that we need to deal with. So let me take this opportunity to thank Ambassador Roel Nieuwenkamp, Director General Hanneke Schuiling for hosting this important event today. And a big thank you to our friends and colleagues at the Spanish Banking Association, Alejandra and team. I'm very happy and proud of our cooperation. And in the recent paper that we developed together, as mentioned by you already, Roel, we provide further insight in how banking associations, along with banks and others, can align with the Paris Agreement. And the report shares important learnings on how to create a safe working space, how to partner with government, how to align with international standards. And it looks at challenges around data availability, engagement, and finding decarbonization pathways. And I hope that this paper inspires you to continue your important work. And it's clear that we need to continue this work. In October, for instance, the United Nations published their yearly emissions gap report, and it made clear that the implementation of the current pledges will only reduce to a 2.4 to 2.6 degrees temperature rise by the end of the century. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and we need international leadership. We need a European cooperation, and together with national initiatives such as Principles for Responsible Banking, UNEP-FI, and the European Sustainability Finance Action Plan, we can make this work. And this is why we need to work collectively and find a way forward. We need new technologies. We need to work on data. We need to have a dialogue with our clients and with each other. There will be many challenges ahead, and our leadership will be put to the test. And let me share a final examples of things we do on this path forward. This summer, we brought a group of 8 leaders from the banking sector into nature. We spent a week in the Norwegian mountains, outside, without phones or watches. We walked in silence, slept in the open air, and immersed in nature. And during the week, we spent 36 hours completely alone in the woods. We drank water from the rivers, we saw the wild animals close by, and connected truly to Mother Nature. And we saw and we felt how fragile nature really is, and how nature is changing due to climate change. We felt the connection with our elders and the generations that came before us. And we all had our visions for the future. We all came back inspired and with a clear path. We must remain focused. We must work together. We must deliver for at least 7 generations to come. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending this conference. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for giving us the opportunity to be here to talk about the importance of the climate commitments. Around the COP25 at the end of 2019, only 3 countries signed a national commitment to climate action on a voluntary basis, complementing the pledge that most leading banks, just like BBVA or ING, around the world signed under the umbrella of the Principle for Responsible Banking. These countries were the Netherlands, Germany, and Spain, creating a momentum in which the fighting against climate change was an important point. And we thought that it could be a good idea to share experiences learned from each other and translate best practices to other countries or banking associations. The result was a document made by the banking association of these three countries that we have used to increase visibility, to make credible commitments, and developed the new ideas, not only sharing best practices from the leading banks, but also translate these experiences into the rest of the sector with less resources, etc. And most important, to discuss many challenges with governments. This is the value of this paper. But now, thanks to you, Ambassador, and your team, we can discuss about these topics that, once again, is very relevant because, I refer to the climate commitments, because we have in a context in which, in the COP27, this kind of initiatives, in some way, has been challenged, has been questioned, because some people argue that we need to create more credibility, to create action, and to translate these commitments to real impact. To discuss these issues and many other topics, this morning I have the privilege to have a panel made up of some colleagues in the field, some colleagues of the sustainable finance field, more important. Most of them are very friends of mine. No, I'm very proud to be here with them. On my right, I have the pleasure to introduce you Tony Vallabriga, Global Head of Responsible Banking at BBVA, a leading entity in sustainable finance and in many aspects. Tony also is co-chair in the global initiatives in the UNEP5 and chair the Sustainable Finance Working Group at the European Banking Federation. In addition, Floske Koos, and also it's a privilege because he's lead the global sustainability at ING, but more important, this is the first time that I had the opportunity to meet her in person. The first time was a very important day for all of us, because it was the day that our governments closed our offices, sent back to our homes, because it was the day of the pandemic. At least in Spain. We need to close our conference call and go back to home very quickly, and now finally we had met her in person, so it's a pleasure. In addition, Clara Isabel González, also a very good friend from the Bank of Spain. He's a senior economist in the Bank of Spain. She's a specialist in sustainable finance, and to some extent is a representative of the bank in the Network for Green the Financial System. So, probably the most relevant international global initiative related to sustainable finance. And finally, Daniel Bozas, another friend from all coordinator at, for Europe in the UNEP5, and a real specialist in regulatory framework related to sustainable finance also. So, it's a privilege to be here with you. Thank you very much. And I would like to start by asking to Tony and Floske, how do you assess the COP27? I think that even though we want to discuss the importance, the relevance of the climate commitments, I think that we need to start with the COP27. I know, Tony, that there in Egypt, in the COP27, what is your view about the results? Do you think was, to some extent, was successful, the results of the COP27?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. Congratulations to the Netherlands Embassy and the Spanish Association as well for organizing this event, and congratulations for the job that you are doing at the Netherlands government promoting sustainable finance. You were clearly our first movers, so we really were. No? of what they are doing. So that's great to be here. So first of all, thanks. And yes, well, I was at COP, and I would say that, well, COP always, but in this case even more, it's an opportunity, you know, for this global cooperation. But that's what we have seen everywhere. No? But I will highlight some key outcomes, you know, key messages. One is that, and we have seen only a few countries have updated NDCs. Europe is one of them, but all the other countries, practically all, are failing quite far on updating ambition on NDCs. Also, we have seen that we have failed to include a phase down on fossil fuels. We maintain exactly the same, practically the same wording that we had at COP. Obviously, we have maintained 1.5 ambition, but I would say that in general, mitigation is a lost opportunity. Because on the other side, the second message is about the support to emerging countries. It is clear that we have had the opportunity to put on the table key topics like loss and damage fund. That was a topic that was not covered at any COP at all till now. Obviously, we agree, something that is important, not in a very concrete way, but at least there is a window of opportunity to clarify what is the ambition on this mechanism for the next year. And also, we had some calls to action to global financial institutions like MDBs or like the World Bank to reform Bretton Woods and to put climate at the center. So, despite we still don't deliver the 100 billion euros every year, next year it seems that it's going to happen, and we have to agree on a new target. It seems that at least on support to emerging countries, things slowly, but things start moving a little bit more, no? Despite of the context. No? I would highlight some key initiatives at the country level that I think that are very promising. We are bank very relevant presence in emerging economies. Practically 2/3 of our gross income comes from emerging economies. So we were very optimistic about the initiative of the Just Energy Transition Partnerships in Indonesia, in South Africa. In a few months, we are going to have in Vietnam, with some governments, European Union as well, supporting specific energy transition in those countries, and also promoting just decommissioning of coal activities. So I think this country-based approach is very up to that, because you start saying that we need to do more credible way. Well, we can comment on that later. Mm-hmm. But I would say that finance, we are there. Publish a report as an Interbank Alliance saying that we are already delivering our commitments. Obviously, it's a long journey. But I would say the focus is on transition finance. So I think that the COP has put on the table the relevance of the transition finance. This is not only about how to finance these 10% activities that are pure sustainable, but we need to promote the transition of the whole economy. So this transition finance, especially for those activities, difficult to abate. So this is a key topic. We have seen the transition plans as a new framework to report for financial institutions from GFAN. So a lot of discussions and a lot of knowledge that we are starting to understand better how to approach this key topic. No? I will close here, but I would say that short mitigation, promising in supporting emerging economies, and then transition finance will be key.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tony. I think the transition finance is key. I know that this is a very sensitive issue in the high level, these discussions, but when you go down to the particular sector, or when you go down to NGOs, etc., I think that we need to work a lot in this topic, because otherwise we claim that we need to make much more efforts, no? On that. Ploske, I continue to talk about COP27, and I would like if you were more precise about what is probably your most positive aspect of the COP27, the most disappointed, and probably the real surprise. No? What do you think is the real surprise for you? No?
Thanks
positive,
for
negative,
asking
and the surprise.
Yeah. Well, let's add then maybe the positive note first, because also the glass was half full, right? It was a real surprise that the Climate Loss and Damage Fund was established. Mm-hmm. And yes, the practicality still needs to come, but I understand it has been 3 decades that there has been talks, and now the deal is there. So also that underlines the importance of climate justice, also for financial institutions. This is a red thread. It goes beyond loss and damage and beyond the fund that already should have been there. So I think that was the surprise and the highlight, and also a message for us. Then, of course, this COP was dubbed the implementation COP. Well, it was not. That was obvious. That's the big disappointment. On the other hand, it could have been worse. I'm an optimist. We could have, backslided, and we did not. So the 1.5 is still there, and we hope that there will be maybe a higher ambition still. But I think the main message here within that disappointment is we need to move beyond commitments to action. Action and accountability, those are the two key words that we take from COP27 to COP28. And there, I think there will be the real momentum, also because of the global stocktake, and transparency and accountability will drive that action. And I think we're going to talk about that more now.
Excellent, thank you very much. At the beginning of the COP27, we were some concern about loss and damage. Of course, that I think we think that this is a crucial issue that to some extent has been solved in the COP27 to some extent. But at the beginning of the conversation, I remember that some ONGs or developing countries were claiming that why don't extend this loss and damage to the private sector? And that could be raise some concerns, because now the private sector could be oil and gas probably, but maybe in the next 5 years could be on other sectors. And I think that we need, from my point of view, I think that the loss and damage is a question, it's a crucial question for countries, but we need to be much more sensitive about the frontiers related to the private sector from my point of view. No? But I come back later on that. Daniel, thank you. And one of the topics of COP27 has been the fight against greenwashing. Do you really think that the banking sector in Europe is feeling this pressure from the market, or and in addition, you are a leading you are a leading in commitments, no? The principle for responsible banking, the collaborative commitment to climate action, and now the Net Zero Banking Alliance. No, what is the value of this voluntary public commitments made by entities, or in our case, by a financial sector or country?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I will start with this last part on the commitments. I think what we have seen is that both from the public sector and the private sector of a keen necessity to really scale up the ambition and to make sense out of what is happening, and to make sense out of, okay, what it is that we are, where do we need to go? And that is coming as well. I also referenced in the early introduction by the Vice Minister that risk, transparency and alignment are critical. And at UNEP5 we're working on this. So alignment is one of the critical aspects that we're looking into. It's not only about managing risks, it's also about understanding where you are now and where you need to be. As we were saying, public sector alone is not able to deliver fully on the challenges that we have ahead. So the private sector is needed. And in this case, the financial sector has shown this commitment by joining UNEP5, joining the PRB, as well as going beyond that and saying, okay, we're going to actually set targets that are binding and stringent enough to take us to the 1.5 degree scenario by 2050. And I think that is the value of the voluntary commitments, that they do not only allow the public sector to say, okay, we need to do this, but also for the private sector to say, okay, we're here with you in order to be able to deliver this. And I think, the banks here have been quite two of the leaders that we are really allowing us to push forward. And I think that's one of the great values. And we have seen the response as well at the country level, like from Spain, Germany, Netherlands, that the banking sector and the public sector are coming together in order to deliver this. So regarding greenwashing and the pressure from both the market and the public sector are there. So regulation in Europe is one of the key elements. Now the European supervisory authorities, they just released a call for evidence on greenwashing that is now open, and they're really trying to understand what is happening. So in Europe you have seen the taxonomy, SFDR, all of these different regulations that are aimed at transparency, other of the three key elements that we said in the beginning. And it's something that, yes, I think the pressure is there, and it is also relevant that it's there because it shows that the market is moving and that the financial sector needs to respond to the challenge. So yeah, that's the two elements.
Great. Clara, I'm going to you in a couple of minutes, but before that, I would like to come back to Floske and Tony, because apparently in the COP27 has emerged a new concept, no? A new word from the green. This word is a greenwashing, no? As a reaction of greenwashing. Any thoughts about that? Any reaction to the paper that the high-level expert group by United Nations was publishing in the COP27, Integrity Matters, and a paper that to some extent put in question that the credibility of these voluntary private commitments on climate action. So any thoughts on that, greenwashing, reaction to the Integrity Matters? What do you think, Floske?
Yeah, well, integrity matters, right? So also for us it's so important that the parties that have signed up to a commitment, maybe even a bold commitment, follow up on that commitment, otherwise it's an empty promise. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with the key message. But also that means then full-on transparency across the board and being challenged, so the institutions that perhaps are not there yet, should be held accountable. Otherwise, there is this group running ahead and other ones not responding, whereas we need to move together to go far. So yeah, greenwashing though has two sides to it, right? So there could be, let's not talk about our commitment because maybe some parties haven't done so much yet or are a bit taken aback about what it means. I mean, also being a bit mindful about what it really takes on top of legislation like the CSRD. That's a massive task. So it's also a pity perhaps that, that there is now, like a spotlight on, greenwashing, there must be something wrong, because a lot of institutions are trying and we are working together here to make that, collaboration move us forward. So, and also we shouldn't get afraid of putting dilemmas at the table. So that's what we at ING are a bit worried about, that there are sectors, for instance, residential housing, that we really need to move in concerted action with governments on. And we can now just retreat in our silos and say, well, we publish a report and we do some actions and we're very modest about it, but we also need to address those challenges. So I don't hope that the greenwashing trend will mean that we'll hush up and do not talk about what really is the elephant in the room sometimes, that we need to move together.
Okay. I just like to complement. Sure, you have to engage with your clients and with all different stakeholders to promote that. So this is the framework, and you have to report year after year, and you have to operationalize this internally. You can come back on later. But the point is that you have to have a framework, and you have to step by step promoting this transformation and asking to all stakeholders to take their part, starting the governments, obviously. So it's great, it's absolutely critical. Greenwashing is a hot topic, but climate change is even more important than greenwashing. So the climate change is happening, so we have to act. So I think that's a top priority, and so I would say that about greenwashing, that's a risk that we have, that companies say, well, too much scrutiny, litigation, legal, even for our voluntary commitments. So that's creating a lot of pressure. So I think we have to be better balanced on that and have a clear reference on frameworks and follow those frameworks and take the time. And then we will have to make a lot of pedagogy because transition finance is complicated. We are going to have sectors that in 2 or 3 years' time, 4 years' time, it takes time. Take time to implement the CapEx and change the business model. So you are not going to have better performance next year and 2 years' time. So we have to understand, we have to be very clear that this is going to happen. And that's part of our role and of the understanding of all the stakeholders, even the NGOs or the watchers that are pushing to tomorrow to change the world. So yes, we have to change the world, but change the world takes time. That's my point.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, with both of you. No, absolutely. Yeah. Clara, I mean you now. In relation to some of the comments that we have raised in the previous conversation, I think that the Network for Green the Financial System was created precisely to standardize prudential and supervisory approaches, and the success of this initiative has been incredible in the last 3 or 4 years, no? Especially for the industry, the banking industry around the world. Now we are talking about the Network Banking Alliance. We are talking about the need that the institutions like UNEP insist that this is a very important role to advance in the climate change, etc. No? What lessons we can capitalize from the network from green the financial system? What are the main lessons?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this roundtable. It is a pleasure being here. And yeah, well, as you have said, I work at the Central Bank of Spain, Banco de España. I have been working on sustainable finance since 2018, when central banks was starting to work on these topics. And well, let me a disclaimer. Of course, all the opinions are only mine. it is just the mandatory disclaimer. But yeah, I was saying that central banks, we were starting to work in 2017, 2018 with the creation of the network for the NGFS, Network for Greening the Financial System, that it is a network of central banks and supervisors working on sustainable finance. The range of areas has increased a lot during the last years. I think that it was created with the message of a coalition of the willing. I think that this reflects very, very well the spirit of this network. And the initial group of central banks and supervisors was only eight, and now currently we have 121 members and 19 observers. So the network has increased a lot during these years, and of course central banks acknowledge that the main the main leadership in this battle against climate change corresponds to government, but finally central banks can have a leading role, a catalyst role. So in 2018 the NGFS acknowledged that climate change could imply a risk for financial stability, and within the mandates of central banks could be just to assure that the resilience of the financial system could be assured in this case. No, I think that I will remark two important values of NGFS. One is international cooperation. As I have mentioned, now we have 121 members from the five continents. The countries represented in this network accounts for more than 85 of the global and total GHG emissions in the world. And we have to coordinate the meetings or the messages or the work that is focused on several areas: micro supervision, climate change scenarios, monetary policy, our own operations, such as the management of our own portfolios or the disclosure of central banks. And the second value I wanted to remark is that NGFS sometimes is even ahead of the curve in some topics, because in 2019, NGFS issued some recommendations regarding micro supervision, financial stability, to integrate SRI principles in the management of own portfolios. And now we are putting in place these recommendations. But even, for example, now the NGFS is working on biodiversity issues now. So I think that this is a very relevant value to identify which topics we need to progress and to work on this, just to put some reports, ideas. I have mentioned that it is the coalition of the willing, and we don't have any regulation to develop, but our messages or our compromise with the NGFS implies that we have to follow these general principles.
Very interesting, because I would like to continue with you, Clara, but before that, a particular question for you, Floske and Tony, because I'm thinking all the time in the principle for responsible banking, the role of the UNPFI, and you are leading these initiatives around the world, in ING, BBVA, and of course, the consensus about what we need to do internationally is very clear in these topics, in these principles and commitments. But I feel that we are fighting every day, trying to solve some obstacles related to data, related to methodology, related to many other things that we need to use to improve. And this is a big difference with the network for green the financial system, because they are creating just the framework, and it's your role to use it or not. But in the UNPFI, in these principles or commitments, you are working, solving the obstacles, no? Instead of thinking ahead, instead to be ahead of the curve, no? What is your reaction on that? No? What do you think? To what extent we can improve our role in this global initiative, capitalizing the experience from the network?
Well, I think that all is happening and in a different ways, but it is critical to have a global convergence in supervision and also in taxonomies, also in disclosure. So that's the challenge, especially for those institutions like us, that we have a global presence, and so it's quite challenging. Obviously, data is critical, but to have data, we need reporting, and we need a reporting framework with the ISSB now promoting, and we hope that we will have a clear interoperability with the EU approach and the ISSB. But these are the type of challenges that we have in all the contexts. Then we have obviously the challenges of the policies at the country level in the different sectors. Not only a nice NDC, but then you have to translate this into policies, into plans. So this is clear pathways for sectors. We don't have that in general. So there is an additional challenge. And then we have the challenge that we have to change internally how we embed this into our business as usual. This is not so easy. So in our case, we have decided to put this in a strategic priority, but now the challenge is not only to set the targets, but also to say how this is going to be implemented into different tools, into your frameworks, into asset allocation, into your decisions making day after day. So these are the challenges that we have. So all these components that we have outside are clear enablers or not of this transformation. No? So I would say that we need this alignment, otherwise, because let's remind that emerging economies, I insist on emerging economies, but we need to invest around $2 trillion every year in emerging economies, only for green transition. Then we have adaptation, but only for that, and we have only, and this is not going to happen, let's say clear, with solidarity. It will happen with economic sense, thanks to the economic sense. So we need obviously a loss and damage fund, we need obviously, but we need this 100 billion double, triple, so we need to increase a lot, and we have to develop mechanisms to the risk and to mobilize the private finance into those economies that is ready to go, but we need to the risk. So, and we need a standards convergence in those markets to have better information from our clients and to help them in the transition. So this is a lot happening that, so I would insist that we are here, we are Spain, Netherlands, Europe, but the world needs to change also in those countries, otherwise we are not going to succeed. So I think initiatives like NGFS is absolutely critical because the global reach is absolutely critical, no, to make this. And so we are very happy to work with the NGFS as collectively, as banks, and we appreciate the work they're doing, so that's fantastic.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry for the long...
No. Would you like to ask? Any other thing?
Maybe adding in a different aspect, because I totally agree about global convergence, standardization, harmonization. I also feel that we have to have many flowers bloom on a national level and on specific actions. You know, we have to further develop the tools, have climate-specific pathways, maybe even agree on the way to get there, like minimum requirements or reduction targets on top of alignment targets, and that, you know, we need to push from bottom up to meet that trend of harmonization top down. And I'm glad that's happening, and I'm really glad you mentioned the implementation within our companies, because we're talking about rules and tools, but it's in the end all about the people. And in our case, it was thousands working at BBVA as well as at ING. They all need to be trained and made aware, and they read the papers, and that's a massive task. Very a task we take on happily, but yeah, maybe there should be a bit more attention for the soft side of this. Yeah.
It's a cultural shift. I remember when we commented at the board, at our board, that we had a discussion 1 year ago about the CO2 emissions per kilowatt produced, because this is the metric we use for power sector, no? And we spent practically 1 hour discussing the CO2 emissions and the pathways and the IA scenarios and this and that, and one board member said, wow, it's fantastic to see how we are learning a lot. In 1 year time, it's impressive to see a board of a bank discussing about CO2 emissions per kilowatt produced. So this is a clear example that is changing. So it's changing, really changing. So that requires a cultural shift that is a massive one at the top, but it's all at the bottom.
Great. Clara, once again, I think that it's a good opportunity to be here with you, because you are saying, no, the network for green, the financial system is always ahead the curve. And I would like that you could share with us what are the concerns that you need to be aware in the following months or quarters, because everything is very the speed is very high, you know. But share with us with more details the areas in which the network for greening and central banks are working now, and we need to translate in our entities, in our sector, or even countries.
Yeah, well, as I have mentioned, the areas where central banks are working on related to climate change have increased a lot during the last years. The GFS has increased, for example, the 3 initial work streams were focused on micro supervision, climate scenarios, and scaling up sustainable finance. And now we have 5 work streams and 2 task forces. These 5 work streams are focused on micro supervision, climate scenarios, monetary policy. We have 1 work stream focus on monetary policy, other focus on own operations, management of own portfolios, disclosure or our own activities, the carbon footprint of our own activities as institution, or the ESG emissions of a central bank, for example, or of the building. 2 task forces, one dedicated to biodiversity, another to increasing capacity building, because we consider that it is very important and relevant to increase capacity building even between us, and indeed the NGFS will develop some programs in order to increase knowledge regarding these topics now. The evolution, I think that is very interesting, because central banks started to work on analyzing the potential impact of climate change on their own financial systems. And then they increased, for example, to analyze the implications for financial stability, and developing new methodologies, or increasing the focus on, for example, climate change, the implications of climate change on macroeconomy and the relation to the financial system. But I wanted to focus on 3 areas. One is supervision, and as you know, during the last years, the ECB has developed a climate stress test in order to understand the potential implication of climate change for individual institutions and for the financial system as a whole. Central banks and the ECB publish some supervisory expectations, giving some areas where the central bank expects, the ECB expects credit institutions have to incorporate climate change, such as business model, strategy, governance, and disclosure. And the ECB set a deadline. No? 2024 is the main deadline to comply with these supervisory expectations. But we have also the decisions of the Governing Council regarding monetary policy, and the Governing Council of the ECB decided to give a further step to include climate change in their monetary policy framework and to incorporate climate change in the collateral framework and to adjust corporate bond holdings, to introduce climate change, to introduce disclosure requirements, and to adjust the risk management process. No? And finally, the other area that I think that it is relevant is that central banks have an important role as asset managers. We have a portfolio, an own portfolio, and we have, in the case of Banco de España, we have been integrating SRI, Sustainable and Responsible Principles, in the management of our own portfolio since 2019. And even in the Euro system, the 19 central banks and the ECB set a common stance in 2021 to integrate these SRI principles in the management of the own portfolio, and we are going to start to disclosure next year information related to these portfolios. No? So I think that, for example, in these three areas that I have mentioned, the work has remarkable in the last years, during the last years.
Excellent. It's very impressive. Thank you very much. And I would recommend a paper just published FS related to how to mix the macroeconomic situation, probably with high inflation and everything, with climate change scenarios in a forward-looking analysis. No? And I think this is very important. I think that this is the kind of reflection that we can learn from the network, and I think it's quite interesting to. I would like to ask to Daniel. X is going well, but we know that reality is quite different. No, but, Tony and Floske has anticipated some challenges, but I would like to ask you that.
yeah, it's like double-sided. No, it's fine. Yeah. So I think that the first element is this lack of standardization and harmonization at the global level. That's one of the key issues that we see. And we do see it at the European level, even within the European system. Let's say that there's very different approaches, either by institutions, by regulators and others, that really still need to be aligned and to put together in a way that actually makes sense and go forward. I mean, we do understand that it's ambitious, that it is the most developed framework that exists, but at the same time, it needs to be put in place in a way that it is usable and it is useful to develop. And I think financial institutions are really trying to do it and to understand, okay, what is happening with taxonomies all around the world, for example. That's one of the critical elements. The second big thing, I think, is data. We have seen many financial institutions that are completely revamping their data management and collection systems because of sustainability. In many cases, they say, okay, we were already planning to do this, we were planning to further digitalization, etc., but now we're doing it as well with a key sustainability focus. And I think we're going to see more data being available, more ways to collect it, but as well a lot of competition in the market to understand who are going to be the key providers, who's going to be providing the key information, and how to put it together internally in a way that makes sense already with the IT systems, or that they are adapted in a way that it is possible to do so. So further to the first point, I think the uncoordinated regulatory approaches, this is more at the global level, that we see now that sustainable finance regulation has been quite a big thing in Europe, But we see more Latin America, Asia, the US that are starting to bring it forward. And there are more things coming up, as well at the international level. You have the ISSB with the standards, etc. So that is coming. And the issue that we see is like, well, in some places, it's only about single materiality and risk. In Europe, it's a lot about double materiality. And when banks in Europe are faced with these kind of constraints and these kind of, let's say, different approaches, they need to be integrated. Then we see as well the preparedness in the market. And by that, I don't mean only, let's say, financial institutions, but I say as well the companies, the borrowers, the investee companies, that they need to provide the information. And it is not the same to say it to a large bank that may have operations in large companies that they do provide the data, than when you go to a large mortgage/SME institution, where they really need to get information that is not available, or even the SMEs do not know how to start collecting or providing. So that is critical. Then I think the last issue is how it all comes together internally. That is the last point about the capacity building internally, how to make sure that everybody in the bank, this is something that we were calling back in the day this hamburger approach. No? You need to be able to convince all parts of the bank in order to make something that it is consistent. It's not all the meat in the middle management and in the people that know about the sustainability, the risk, etc., but also the top management and the front office that are able to do it. You were saying that all of the employees are reading the papers, trying to understand what is happening. Okay, how to integrate it in a coordinated manner, so that package is, let's say, consistent. And I will end it here. There's more things coming, but yeah, it's a lot.
But do you have some idea on how to integrate SMEs in this? Because this is one of the main challenges in every country around the world, no? But at Unipify, are you thinking about that?
Yes, we're thinking about it. I mean, at Unipify, as you can imagine, the PRB and our principles are quite broad and agnostic in terms of your business model. So you can apply them either if you're a large bank, if you're only doing point-of-sale loans, or if you're doing actually SME and retail loans. So on that regard, we do understand the challenge, but it's also part of the needs. If you're actually needing to provide SMEs with services in that area, that you need to understand how to make them compliant, well, that can be a way to do it. But on other points, like at the European level, we do see that there's an interest on how to make sense of this. I mean, the EU taxonomy disclosure rules are going to be reviewed in 2024. The CSRD that you were mentioning before has already been adapted to cover large companies, so 500 employees and more. There may be some elements coming as well, not only for the listed SMEs, but for other smaller companies. And then we see some initiatives here and there, like at the global level, we see a lot in emerging markets that we're trying also to cooperate with our colleagues in UNEP, UNDP, to do things. And then in Europe, for example, the Vienna Initiative, which is an initiative in Central and Southern Eastern Europe, is trying as well to generate templates on how to collect information from SMEs and make sure that they get the information that they need in order to comply with their requests. And in some cases, also the request from upstream in the value chain. Let's say if you have a large company that is asking you for information, like BMW is asking a car part manufacturer to provide sustainability information, they're also going to be able to do it in a different way. But it's here and there, and I think we're going to see at some point at the European level as well a more coordinated approach. But for now, little by little, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Before going back to Floska and Tony, because we need to make it real. No, I would like to ask them how to implement in your entities all this discussion. No, but before that, I would like to insist in metrics and methodologies, etc., as a key tool in order to advance with more clarity and objectivity, to be objectives in the way that we need to advance in this journey. So, Clara, what else can be done regarding measurement, methodologies, and looking forward approach, etc.? No? What are you thinking in the NGFS about that? Because I think it's crucial. No.
Yes. Well. Yeah, I was thinking regarding the challenges because I think that all of us have in mind the same challenges. One is data availability, and it is relevant for all, and even for the development of new methodologies, for development of new indicators. In the case of the NGFS, they have developed climate change scenarios. It is the third session, if we could say that, and I think that it is a very good example of cooperation between economists and climate scientists. No? That is similar to what you said before, that now we are learning a lot on other aspects related to climate change, and in order to be able to define and to develop indicators, we have to know more regarding climate change. In this case, the climate scenarios, I was in the first group that was developing these climate scenarios, and we were talking about, okay, we have these global trends, but we need more detail regarding sectors or regarding geographical areas, no? For example. So it is needed to develop more detailed scenarios, for example. And it is important to develop forward-looking indicators in order to link these scenarios with the backward-looking indicators. Backward-looking indicators is the past, is, for example, the total GHG emissions. So we need now the development of new methodologies. I think that we have some of them, but we need a higher level of development in these metrics in order to be able to link the past, the total emissions, with the development and the design of transition plans in order to be able to set targets. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't have this type of indicators or a basic set of indicators to design these transition plans, we cannot to fix the targets. And again, we have the challenge of the data availability and quality of data. I think that it is just a circle, and it is also related to disclosure. I don't know if you want to. I can explain more, but finally, I think that we have a common challenge, that it is climate risk disclosure, no? And as you have mentioned, we have different standards, and I think that finally a global standard could be very useful in order to have a common language. That finally, I think that it is the purpose in order to achieve the climate change goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're totally right. No, I think that of course we need this regulatory framework. We need a standard, but I think also that we need more clarity on metrics and more consensus on metrics, and especially metrics with a forward-looking approach, instead of looking in the backwards and calculate the green asset ratio. What I wonder the utility, the usefulness of this indicator. No? And now, Tony Floske, I would like to hear about you related to how to implement in your entities all these transformational effort in related to climate change, social issues, etc. No? Tony, what are the most significant initiatives in the BBVA that you have been adopted to show your conviction, no? to contribute against climate change? Just a reaction to this greenwashing, no? How you can demonstrate your conviction on that?
Well, we have strong commitment, but we are already delivering, no? But this, as I said, this is a long journey. So first, I would say that this is something that is strategic for the bank, as other banks like ING and our colleagues here in Spain and also in other countries. But for us, it's clear focus on our strategy, our strategic priority. So first. Second, we have decided that we need a different structure to mobilize it at the level that we need, and so we have defined a business unit called Sustainability, reporting to the CEO and to the chairman, with only including only sustainability, and including not only the experts like ourselves, but also a reporting line from business units. So all business units, all business development teams report not only to the global head of business development, but also to the head of sustainability. So we are embedding business in sustainability. So this is a key idea that we are focusing this as a business opportunity, and also risk, but that we need to help our clients in this transition. So that's, I think, is the second area. The third is that, okay, we have a commitment to mobilize 300 billion euros between 2028 to 2025. We start in February 2028 announcing 100 billion, but we have double and now 300 billion. We have already delivered 124. Having an holistic approach to sustainability, not only for those pure green taxonomy activities, but also all these other different solutions that we have in place to promote the transition, and also other environmental objectives, and also inclusive growth. So we have an holistic approach to sustainability, and helping and developing products and trying to innovate and in all our markets. But the third point I would like to highlight more is the net zero. The net zero commitment, as I said, we have this commitment to become net zero in our finance emissions by 2050, and we have already set targets as NZBA guidelines in sectors covering 80% of the CO2 emissions. So in power, in oil and gas, auto, cement, steel, a phase out on coal. So we have already, and we are going to set targets in additional sectors in the coming months. So this is clear, but the most important is how to translate these targets into our business as usual, as I said before. So we are embedding this into our risk appetite framework. We are embedding this into our industry frameworks. In each one, we are embedding those. We are including this into our financial programs with the information that we require also from our clients in this, not only climate, but also other ESG topics, and embedding this in all the different tools that we have to become this as business as usual. We have just launch a steering committee on alignment with the key members of the leadership, and we have assigned a specific ownership to each target for each sector. So we have a clear accountability that's going to happen with each curve that we have. So there is an ownership for each curve, a clear ownership. And then I would say in terms of tools, we have developed our TRI, which is a transition risk indicator, which is a scoring that combines 20% of the information we have from a client from, let's say, for the current situation, thanks to the TCFD reports and so on. But also we have 80% of this score belongs to all forward-looking information. So this is how we score our clients. So we are starting to use this TRI also with our credit scores to see with our allocation have to evolve. And a key metric in this TRI, obviously, the CapEx. Show me the CapEx. Show me the CapEx you are going to do. So you are going to have a credible transition plan, or not. So the resilience on climate change is very linked to those key asset metrics that are, at the end of the day, what it counts. So that's how we are embedding, challenging. It's amazing, but it's not easy.
I'm very proud about, but. You lack another a missing point that I miss in your conversation has been your generosity, because another very important point is that all these things that BBVA is doing in the entity with their clients and customers and regulation, etc., is translating into the rest of the banking sector with less resources, less people, less concern about all these topics, and I think it's crucial to share these best practices, and this is our role that in the Spanish Banking Association, and probably in jointly with UNIPIFI, the European Banking Federation, etc., we are doing. But in Spain in particular, I think that all this experience has been translated by Tony and his team, Santander, etc., in order to the less resources entities had made a catch up with this.
Let me say, Juan Carlos, pardon, but I think it's important to recognize that this is something that we have to work all together collectively, and this is where with ING and other three banks we start this journey in Katowice, working all together to develop methodologies, to see how we can understand this new reality. And this is the spirit that we need. No? So we need to compete, obviously, but we need also to co-create all together, because the challenge is so huge that we have to have a systemic approach. Otherwise, we are going to fail. So this is a race that is going to be won not with the first crossing the line. Will be the last one has to cross the line. So we need to, and that's the. So it's something that is also part of our strategies. How we can help the system change. No?
Of course, we are building a framework, and we need to build this framework all together. But so the same goal, the same, very probably the same initiatives. You are working all together very, very closely, ING, BBVA in these global initiatives. But Floske, what in your entity is demonstrating your conviction, that you are doing all these things related to climate change, human rights, social issues, in a very credible and real impact activity.
Yeah, thanks. And also thanks for referring our collaboration, because also at ING we have two strategic priorities: our customers, of course, and sustainability. And sustainability is the direct responsibility of our CEO. So it's a board level commitment, KPIs, etc., cascade from that. So I think what demonstrates our conviction is that we play this chess on three boards. We show the commitment, so yes, Net Zero Banking Alliance, we put ourselves out there and really commit to those goals, but we also show the action, so we report on our progress and make that as much as possible open source and available to all, be it methodologies or sector-specific climate pathways, a recent example being the Principles for Sustainable Steel that we co-developed with other financiers, and also with the industry. I think that's a next frontier to really make it practical and land. And then we need to translate it to our company, like you were saying, implementing in all these processes, climate risk, climate alignment, but also biodiversity upcoming. And the risk processes are already being there for human rights and other sustainability priority topics. So I think by sharing with the world your progress in an honest way and sharing your insights for the greater good, you can really show you're on your way, and then you have to show the real progress in the real world, so CO2 reduction. So yeah, let's keep on doing that.
Great, excellent. And finally, Daniel, the final words related to how do you think that Unify can do in order to make it real, all this conversation, no? Beyond to design principles, design commitments. What do you think you can do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the role of UNEPFI, I mean, what we say many times, that we are a convener. No? We try to convene the industry, but the principles and the approaches that we do are always led by the banks, and they are led by the key commitment that they make when they join. That is to say, okay, you're going to work with UNEPFI, you need to think progressively as well. You need to think in a way that is integrating these elements into the organization, but as well how you're planning to go forward. And I think that's the critical element that, these dimensions, like transparency, risk alignment, I mean, they're always moving around these elements. And you need to make sense of all of them and integrate them in a way that is feasible for you to keep going forward. So our role is to keep encouraging, keep working in this direction, and making sure that everybody has the right tools and the capability to do so. I mean, we understand that it is not the same for everyone. In some cases, there may be some smaller institutions that are more able to comply, let's say, than larger institutions, because the complexity is different. So the business just needs to focus on one specific thing and do it very well. Meanwhile, in other cases, they need to really look into this whole element. So our approach is to continue being supportive, continue this, let's say, collaboration, and bridge the approaches, let's say, the public sector, regulatory, mandatory elements with voluntary, private sector-led initiatives. And they're complementary. One helps the other. I mean, regulation is not going to tell you, it's not going to give you the full amount of data that you need. You need to collect it still. But it's going to guide you on what is relevant, what do you need, etc. And just to probably end that, what I think, I mean, some years ago, I remember a good speech from Frank Elderson, like it was the governor of the Bank of the Netherlands. He was speaking about the connections between, for example, AML and sustainability. It was about dark or black money and brown, green money, this kind of connection. No? So AML now is completely standardized. It's something that is like normal order of business. And I think sustainability is going to become the same. And that is the approach. Once you have impact and sustainability and alignment and risk already integrated, and these forward-looking approaches are also feasible, then the approach is going to come together. It's going to be quite natural for the financial institutions. And I think that that's the goal. The final aim is to really make sustainability, as also Dombrovskis was saying many times, you know, it's not going to be just sustainability, but it's going to be integrated into the mainstream. So that's the idea as well. And I think the collaboration is in those terms.
Great, thank you very much, all of you. I would like to finish this panel saying that instead to say goodbye to 1.5 Celsius degree, as the economy is showing in the last issue, I would like to say hello to net zero, because if Bank of Spain, UNEP and two big entities, leading entities, that trying to make it real, all this effort, I think that we are closer to the net zero than the health announced by the United Nations President. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
For this wonderful panel, and with this we would like to conclude the session of today. No? Oh, sorry, no. I'm way too soon. Yeah. I would like, I was just going to talk about some conclusions that I took from the panel. And it's way too soon, because first we have another great speaker, the chair of the Banking Association of Spain.
Gracias, Embajador, and thank you to you and your team for organizing this. I'm sure you would have much better conclusions than me, but I will very quickly say what I wanted to say and to share with you. It's really a great pleasure to be here, among other things, because we are neighbors. The Spanish Banking Association is here in the same building, so it's easy for us to engage and to have this kind of sessions, and I think we should do it more often. It's also great to see you, Elke, and Elko, sorry, and to have the Dutch Banking Association represented here. I think we do great work together, and we have to continue to do so, representing our banks. I have to say that we see the Netherlands as a country, as a leader, as a reference in sustainable business and in climate change strategies also. There's many things we should exchange in terms of best practices and learn from you also, of course. The one thing I think I won't do is spend how many hours alone in a forest, Elko? 36 hours alone in a forest. I'm sorry for my banks and my bankers, Tony, but I'm not going to lead that purpose. You can take us and I will follow maybe, but I feel my risk aversion is a bit higher, I think, than Elko's. But as chair of the Spanish Banking Association and representing Spanish banks, I have to say I'm very honored and I'm proud to be able to be here today with you to discuss such important topics. On the conclusions from this wonderful panel, I have many things also that I took note of from my first message, or my first conclusion. It is an incredible challenge, also an opportunity. It's not easy, right? I mean, I think that's it's not easy. No one told us it was going to be easy. We continue to move slowly. I acknowledge what you meant, your conclusions from COP. We're moving maybe slower than we wanted to, but we're moving. And this is not, we have to be conscious of that. Also, how difficult implementation is, right? And I think we have to talk more about this. I think, as Tony said, banks are here. Banks are fully committed. I think as a sector, we have to be proud of our commitments, but we also have to explain the challenges, the difficulties of implementation. And I think you did a great job today, both the banks, also, of course, Clara from the Central Bank and Daniel explaining, that this is, we have to continue to work. How I've seen it from a bank, I've seen it from Santander, how to align culture, how to align governance, how to align systems, methodology, methodologies, data, people, getting the right people. You mentioned, Clara, I think, how you were combining climate experts or scientists and economists. This is new for banks. Sorry, we didn't have climate experts until, not a long time ago. So, but this is a way of doing it, right? And maybe this is the way of avoiding this hushing that you mentioned also, Floske, now, talking more about the challenges of making the right hamburger. Was it a hamburger? Who talked about the hamburger? Yeah, okay, so I got that also in my notes. And how important the leadership from central banks also. I want to mention that. I want to say that here in Spain, the leadership of Banco de España, who very early on, told us banks, come to a meeting, banks, and when the central bank calls you, you really have to, get ready for that meeting, right? And so aligning, leading, helping in developing the scenarios, no? And all the things you mentioned, I think is super important. So now the 4 messages I had worked on to share with you today are the first one: commitments are important. I think this is, this discussion today came from this paper that we worked on together, right? The associations and I think about commitments, and commitments are important. They help us make progress, and I think we all agree with that, right? They help us because they provide internal alignment. I mean, and you discussed this. They set the targets. They help us, they make us think and understand better the impacts, develop the action plans. As I said, I saw it from the bank I worked for for many years. The discussion about the commitment itself already starts, helping people and all the teams aligned and think about what we need to do, how to get ready for this. Are we prepared? Can we do it? Just the discussion about the commitment already is making progress, right? The second thing, it helps external alignment. It also, it helps us to think more about the Paris Agreement and what we need to achieve. Benchmarking, comparing yourself with others. I think this is also important for all stakeholders. Everyone, customers, suppliers, everyone starts to understand where the bank or the institution wants to go, through these commitments. So external alignment also very important. And of course, it also increases these commitments, increase the visibility and the credibility of an institution's sustainable strategy. So I think that commitments are important. That's my first message. The second one for me is that the financial sector has set ambitious commitments on a voluntary basis, and I think we have to be proud of that too. Spanish banks in particular, and I can speak for them, a Spanish Banking Association as a supporter, but it's the banks really who have committed to this. We support, of course, the UN, and you mentioned that, Daniel, no? The principles for responsible banking. From, among the founders, we have 8 Spanish banks, so I think that's great, and today there's 300 banks worldwide, and 10 Spanish banks are in there. The second, the collective climate action commitments also to align banking portfolios with the Paris Agreements. It's signed by 95% of the Spanish banking sector, so I think that's a great. And finally, of course, the Net Zero Banking Alliance that was also very much discussed in the panel today, which specifically addresses climate and carbon emissions, and it's supported by 75% of Spanish assets. So I think we're doing quite well, and we're proud of that, and we probably, we need to increase our ambition every day, no? A comment here also is how regulation also sometimes goes faster than our customers and than some of our smaller banks can keep up. It's complex, and I think you also mentioned this. Sometimes it's uncertain. We don't know if changes are coming or not. It's inconsistent internationally. You mentioned that too. So I think we need to also take this into consideration when we discuss and we have the conversations with our regulators. And very important, the comment that you made, Tony, and I think also you, Juan Carlos, you moderated very well, by the way, I thought. The focus on transition, no? It is very easy to finance green. I mean, it's, all our banks, the banks present here are champions in financing green. That's the easy part, right? The difficult part is financing the brown to green, no? That transition. And I think that's something that regulators and ourselves, we need to focus much more on. So the third message is that progress on these commitments require public and private collaboration. And you've mentioned it today also very frequently.
also cross-sectoral and cross-country collaboration, I would add. So I think being here today is part of this and is very effective, I would say. The financial sector cannot be the only one or the most important driver of change, and sometimes we feel that we have a lot of responsibility. We like that responsibility because it makes us feel important, but we need, we need to work together, and that's clearly a conclusion of the panel. No? First, and you also mentioned it very clearly, we need, sorry, I lost this, the sectoral transition pathways, absolutely. I mean, this is, without these, we're blind. I mean, we really need these, right? And public sector leadership is critical to get these. Clara, I think you're leading the way here, and it's very important. Banks will always be fully dependent on what other sectors can provide, can report, can tell us, can give us. Without other sectors, it will be very difficult for us to meet our own commitments. So we need really all the relevant actors to develop their ambitious long-term climate strategies. You mentioned SMEs, absolutely. That's where most of the challenge is, because these smaller companies do not have the tools or the capacities that the larger ones have. So we feel that responsibility towards our customers. We want to help them provide, and here we have, in fact, in Spain, the FINRESP, Spain's Center for Sustainable and Responsible Finance, and we are working on a program actually to collect ESG data from SMEs in different sectors, and it's proving not an easy task, right? But we're working on it, and hopefully it will be a good pilot that we can develop further in the coming months. So yes, data is absolutely critical, and we need also refined homogeneous methodologies, and that's something we have to, as I said, work on together. And in addition to the pathways and to the data and the methodologies, I think we also need more of these kinds of platforms to engage and to exchange best practices. I think this is key, from public to private, private to public, from larger to smaller banks. And you mentioned the effort, Juan Carlos, that our large banks are doing to help the smaller banks too. I think that this is very important. And also among the associations, Elko, I think we learn a lot, no, from the work that we each do in our own areas. So, and finally, my fourth point is about reputational risk. Yes, we are concerned about this. I think we absolutely, integrity is key, and I think that is something that we are all very conscious of. But putting too much focus on greenwashing might be counterproductive and lead to this green hushing. I don't think it's the way to go. As I said before, I think the way to go is to talk more about how challenging implementation is, but how we can all learn from each other and try to make progress together. I think that I'm concerned that if we go to green hushing, we will set back progress instead of moving forward. So, of course, don't get me wrong, I think that commitments are key to progress, so we have to be very transparent in our commitments, of course, and very forceful. But as I say, I'm concerned about these reputational discussions that I'm seeing are increasing in tone. So, in conclusion, yes, we are in a hurry, right? The climate crisis is an urgency. I read the other day UN Secretary General Guterres say the world is on a highway to climate hell. No, this is a very scary language, but I think it's the right framework, right? This is an urgency, an emergency, so we really have to work together to implement, as you said. I mean, it's implementation stage right now. We should not talk so much about where we want to go. We know where we want to go, so let's just sit down and do it, but it's not easy. So I think we also need to be able to speak very transparently, as you've done today, on the difficulties. And well, let's not forget that sustainability needs to be financed. So this is a sentence that Juan Carlos repeats every time he speaks about this, and I think he's right. This is the responsibility that our sector has as a key player in this, and we take that responsibility, and we will continue to work together, but we cannot do it alone. We need the public sector also to help us, and the other sectors to accompany in here. So we will continue to work on this. Thank you very much again for the invitation and for the work of all the teams behind this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alejandra, and sorry that I hardly couldn't help myself digging into the substance and wanting to say much more about it. But of course, that's not my task. I am very proud of this meeting. to be honest. And it's great to see the leadership of the Spanish and the Dutch banks together in this topic. And I found the day today and also the panel very insightful. It gives a very good overview of what's happening on the individual banks, but also on the level of the central banks and also on the level of what happens at UNEP FI and some other fora internationally. So it's good that we have recorded this panel discussion and the speeches. So it's possible to distribute the recordings as well. I think Tony and some others have mentioned the term journey, and the way to sustainable finance is a journey, and it indeed is a journey. But every COP is a reminder of the fact that we need to speed up this journey and that we need to scale up this journey. So more banks need to join, not only the Spanish and the Dutch banks, and also we have to walk or even run faster, because indeed, like the UN Secretary General mentioned, it's if we don't take this journey to sustainable finance and to sustainability in general, we will end up in hell. So it's great that the Dutch and Spanish banks together are leading this journey. Thanks so much.